Okay. Look at that. I look like springtime. As we have 4 waiting, I got thumbs up already just for this shirt probably. Acres Green Acres. This is going to be our weekly installment of the Anyone Can Farm question and answer, where we delve into all things farmstead, homestead, small farms, and just plain living. That's my new intro. So things are good. We made it through the problems that we probably could have had down in Virginia, and I'm glad that things turned out the way they did. You know, things could have gone sideways there pretty quick. And I think that's an important thing for people to track and see how that was handled, because that's some of the things that we face in the farm community against similar entities that would like to see us restricted and put out of business. And it has to be handled in quite the same way. If there's no questions about that, I'm not going to go into it, but it took up quite a bit of my time watching it and trying to figure out who was in control and who was going to react poorly. Turns out things turned out very, very well. All right. As far as us, we are preparing to go down to Cincinnati. This Saturday will be the first annual Rogue Food Conference, and this is being put on by John Moody and Joel Salatin. John Moody is a guy that runs a food club, and he's also a small farmer. With Joel Salatin for a while on media projects, and you know, I don't know exactly because I haven't sat down with these guys, but it appears to me that the Rogue Food Conference is just what it says. It is they're staking a line to where they've decided to call out. You know, a dog barking outside.
That's your puppy.
I know. They've decided to call out the agencies like the Department of Agriculture and other similar departments that have been making life very difficult for small farmers. They seem to be working against what they say their mission is. It sort of reminds me of the book 1984, where you had the Ministry of Love was actually where they took people to re-educate them and torture them, you know. So the Department of Agriculture is, in my opinion, is somewhat the Department of Anti-Agriculture. You know, they promote processes that pollute, they promote processes that make people sick, and they promote processes that actually makes it very difficult for farmers to make a living, but they create a lot of $10 an hour jobs, which is not a living wage anymore here in the United States of America. So I'm not a big fan of the Department of Agriculture. So this conference could be really good. I'm really looking forward to going down there. I'm going to be the second speaker. And okay. And I'm going to have 60 minutes to put together something for you all, and I'm really looking forward to that. I've been working on it, thinking about it a lot. Since I announced this, a lot of people from our tribe seem to have purchased tickets because it's sold out right now. So that's good. So we'll see a lot of you down there, and I'm looking forward to that. Today, I finally listened to a podcast, and it was a TED Talk, actually, and it was Joel Salatin's presentation at a university. It's called a TED Talk. I've heard of it before, and the title of it was What Gets Me Up in the Morning. And I would recommend that you find that and listen to it, because here we are in the midst of winter, middle of January or end of January. It's no man's land outside. There's no sign of life. Everything's frozen solid, covered with snow. Not that it's not fun, not that there's not things that we can do, but as far as, you know, the abundant life that our farms can bring us, it's hard to see it. I know it's there, but it's hard for me to see it at this point. But his TED Talk was very inspirational. It was short. It was like 15 minutes. And I think it encapsulates what we are about as small farms. And I would really recommend that people listen to it. And what it does for me is it helps me embrace what I'm doing. And even though right now I'm not doing a lot, you know, I'm not doing a lot that's bringing life forward. I'm not partnering with this ecosystem. The ecosystem's asleep and I'm walking around on top of it. I'm looking out over it. I guess I am doing what I need to. I'm thinking about it. You know, it holds a place in my heart, but it doesn't feel like it. You know, when spring comes forward and you walk outside and it hits you, the smells, the sounds, you know, the way it feels under your feet, that is not here right now, but I know it does exist. So that was my thought for the day, actually, was when the farm wakes up, what is my role in this? How am I partnering with this ecosystem? And if the ecosystem could speak, if it could communicate with me what it wants me to do, what would that be? And I think if I think about it long enough, I'll probably get the answers to it. Salatin talks about how industrial farming wrestles with the land and forces it to give it up, give up something. But the sustainable farmer, the organic farmer, works in unison with the ecosystem, and the abundance that comes from it is more than we asked for, far more than we asked for. So I guess I really understand that, the whole composting, bringing in a lot of organic material, taking good care of our dirt, paying attention to the different grass species that are growing, and always adding a more diverse species layer of forage, and utilizing our animals for what they were designed for. It all helps, and it's all worked really good. Plus this just techniques of, say, like a fence line. It's one of the things I learned when I first started this. We have a fence line going down the east, and I wasn't exactly sure where the boundary was. And I didn't know anybody when I first moved here, and the people that owned it aren't around. And I didn't want to infringe on anybody. I wanted to just be, you know. And so I was reading Joel Salatin's books, and he talked about a buffer area, a riparian area. And it's in between their fields and my fields. I left wound up being about 20 feet. It was way more than it needed to, but I left a good 8 feet. I knew I could be further over, but I just left it. And what's happened is the trees have filled in there, and you know, a lot of the native species that would have been here before have filled in. And what that has done, it's made nesting areas along there for birds. It's made habitat for, say, mice and voles and all that stuff, which keeps the predators there and not up on me. So it made a lot of sense, because my neighbors are conventional farmers, and they go from fence to fence, and there's nothing in between but corn. And so it's pretty much dead, other than the time when there's corn growing in it. So that little buffer has really helped me out a lot. And I have a buffer on both sides actually, and then in the back I have a swamp. And we are up in the front. So in the center part of the farm, there's plenty of room for nature, and then we try to work with that, and have had some pretty good success with that. So
Hey, Scott wanted to know, what was that podcast that you heard Joel on?
that was Why I Get Up in the Morning. Joel Salatin, Why I Get Up in the
And
Morning.
it was a TED Talk.
TED Talk, yeah. It's on YouTube. So there was a bunch of them there, and I just, you know how if you listen to one thing on YouTube, then when it ends, it gives you another one. And so I got to listen to him way back, 20, probably 15 years ago. I met him probably about 14 years ago at a small farms conference here in Michigan. And at the time, I was newly out of the Air Force and not sure what I was going to do with this property. I knew I wanted to farm, but I had no idea really what to do. I had purchased some calves, and I had some chickens, but I wasn't sure the direction that I was going to go. And oddly enough, ironically enough, I was approached by people from Michigan pork producers, and they saw me as somebody with an 80-acre farm with good credit, and I was in a neck of the woods where there weren't any hog houses. And I was actually meeting with them, had a site survey done and everything, and we were going to put 2 of the very biggest hog houses down on our back 40. And my wife did not like the idea of that. And as the process progressed, it's a long story, but as it progressed, we found out that they have restrictions, and their restrictions are, well, if you're going to do business with us, you can only have 1 dog. You can't raise your own pigs. You can't have any poultry on your farm. It's our stuff, and that's it. And the further we looked into it, the more we saw that this was not going to work for us. And then there was some incidents that happened with them that, as a military person, I found them totally unacceptable. The guy no-showed me and no-called me. And I thought this was a professional executive. And I thought for sure he had had a heart attack and died. I thought for sure no one would ever do that to you. But called Monday morning, I expected to get a secretary saying, so-and-so died. And so-and-so answered the phone. I said, I thought you were supposed to be at my house Saturday. And he says, oh, yeah, well, I drove by Thursday. It'll be fine. It wasn't fine with me. So I wasn't able to get over stuff like that very easily. When I first got out of the military, I was still wrapped up a little tight, and things like no show, no call. It still bothers me, but I realize I'm in a different environment. But anyway, we didn't go that direction. At the same time is when I went to the Small Farms Conference, which here in Michigan, it used to be run by farmers. And Joel Salatin was there. He was the keynote speaker, and I was blown away by this guy. And I got his book. The next year, I couldn't go. For crazy reasons. And I cracked that book open that day, and I read that book, and it was Pastured Poultry Profits. And that's when I learned who the guy was. And then shortly after that, the Small Farms Conference was commandeered by the Extension Service, the University Extension. And then they exclaimed that he's too radical. He was the first guy that I ever heard that said, the USDA, they should shut it down. And I even thought at the time, oh boy, that's kind of, USDA, that's right there with the post office, isn't it? Well, it turns out it isn't. And I've come to feel the same way. It should be shut down. Same with the Department of Agriculture on the state levels. We spend millions of dollars on those people, and what do? What do they actually do for us? Nothing, but I'll stay away from that. Anyway, that's where I first met him. He wouldn't remember me from that, but then when the feral swine thing happened in 2000 and 11, I wound up being asked to speak at a conference out in California to tell the story. And I got to meet him. We rode from the airport together, and he had heard about the feral swine thing and was concerned about it, and I had a nice chat with him. And then we had dinner that night, the group of the people that were speaking at this conference. And then the day that I was speaking, which was my very first time speaking at a conference, he was in the audience. So here I am speaking to my mentor. And when I was in the Air Force, we used to have this thing that they would talk about, security, when you're protecting, operational security, or you're protecting secrets and stuff like that. When you're a new guy, you're just an airman or airman first class or something. And let's say somebody of high rank from awe of rank. And I always thought that was funny. But when I was dealing with him the first couple of times, I didn't really have much to say to him. I just was in awe of this guy that was actually doing something that I really wanted to do. So it's been good because things have we've kind of caught up and come into our own with the farming business, and feel comfortable with the things that we're doing, and feel comfortable with being novices at things we haven't done yet. Feel very comfortable in it. I'm comfortable with where I am and what I'm doing. This week, actually, I thought I'd share this with you. There's been things that have happened since we changed our business model and we went from the commercial business model to the homestead business model. I didn't see this as part of the plan, but this is what has happened. Jill and I are what I think you would call process-orientated people. So at the end of the day, when we head to bed, let's say, and we're going to talk for a minute, we don't talk about how much money we made that day. That's not usually like, that's not, it's great, I guess, if you had a good day, but it's not really what gets us turned on. What turns us on is, did we learn something new? Did we do it better? Did we see our children grow because of a process that we're doing? Did we see our children get challenged? Did we see them overcome? Did we see them adapt? Did we see their little personalities develop because of what we're doing on a farm? And that process has been there the whole way through. We did get tripped up for a while because we got on the rat race with everybody else trying to make money, and then competing, and then we had the problem with the state, and that totally fogged everything over. It was just a fight for survival. And at one point thinking to myself, I'm fighting this entity that's 10 times bigger than me, most likely going to lose and get my butt waxed. For what? I'm not making any money anyway, or not making a ton of money. It's not like I'm protecting a Fortune 500 company, but we're spending that much money to protect it. And when it was all over, we went back to the process, and that's where we are right now. And that's the beauty of this whole thing, is the process, the coolness of it, the people that we meet, and the books that we read along the way, and the new processes that we try. And maybe we're successful at them, maybe we're not successful at them, but it's just a lot of fun. And I think that's why a time like this with you all works, is because we're probably all on the same page as far as what we're trying to do in some loose, what would you call it? Common denominator here. We're all looking for sort of the same thing. So that's why something like this works. Why I come back week after week. This is fine for me. I like doing this. Jill likes doing this. It's usually kind of a high point of our week in some ways. And then we have a pretty consistent group of people, and that's great. I think we're going to see a lot of you down at the conference, and I'm really looking forward to that. If you come to the conference and we have not met, please go out of your way to come up to me and say, hey, I come to the, I'm part of the tribe, or I come to the Wednesday night call-in show. So if there's any questions for me or Jill, please put them in caps tonight. Any other announcements? We don't have any classes coming up. This conference can be live streamed if you go to Rogue Food Conference. Yeah, that's what it is. You can live stream it. I think it's about $35.
I'm putting the link in the chat.
And Jill's putting the link in the description. I'm the number 2. I'm the number 2 speaker, which is cool. Number 3, actually, because Joel's going to speak first, right?
Yeah, Joel, and I think, yeah.
Yeah, a lady that runs a food church. This is
Which is a
all,
pretty cool idea.
yeah, which is a cool idea. I think we're going to hear a lot of different and very innovative things about the food system and breaking away from industrial agriculture and its strict bureaucratic rules and everything else. You got to get away from it because it's not running very smoothly. All right, I'm ready to go. I can yak. And I'm ready to
Okay.
go. I'm ready to go. I
All
already
right.
have a question that somebody, unless you have one. Jill has one.
I've got 2 from off the internet earlier this week, but I'll give you Laura Green's question because it's right here.
Laura Green.
And she's live. What do you think of feeding pigs fodder?
Oh, I think highly of that. Let me explain to you guys what fodder is. I think I know what she's talking about. I'm pretty sure. Foddering systems is where you have trays, and I've seen trays as long as 20 feet. There were custom-made trays. They were 2 feet deep, 2 inches deep, and 20 feet long, at least 20 feet long. And what they would do is spread seeds out in them. So you could be barley, you could be using alfalfa. That'd be pretty expensive. I don't think I'd do that. Oats, rye would be a good one because rye is so cheap. And then you put a little bit of water on it, then you let it sit, and it will sprout. And then those sprouts will grow and they actually make a mat, it looks like a doormat, and it will get this high. And you'll have to look into it. I have not personally done it, but I've toured facilities that do it, and I got pretty geeked about it. And it's on the list. But what they would do is every day they would stick these handheld spikes into that long tray and then just slide it down. That was on a slight incline and out the end of the doors, and then cut it off in like 4-foot lengths into a wheelbarrow. And each one of those, they called it a fodder biscuit. And anything will eat it. I mean, anything will eat it. Anything that you can have on the fire. I don't know if dogs would eat it, but they probably would. It was good enough where I ate some of it. I said, let's have this for lunch. This is good with a little Russian dressing on it. It would be great. So for sure, that would be great for pigs. And what Laura's doing is she's raising some pigs out on the island, on Beaver Island, and it's a pretty nice island in Lake Michigan, and I've been there about 4 times now, and I plan to go there next summer a lot. I really like it there. Good friends out there, really nice people. Want to see if we can do a class out there next fall. Really like it out there. Highly recommend folks going out there and visiting. It's beautiful. It's just like a tropical paradise. Probably isn't right now, but in the summer when I was there, it was just, the water was so clear and it's just so nice. And but what she's doing is they have a farm and they raise foxes and they harvest the pelts and then turn the pelts into products that then they sell online and do a pretty nice business with that. And I was really impressed with that whole thing. Sewing machines, just patterns, and really nice shop where they made hats and gloves and really cool stuff. And what they learned was when they harvest a fox, they don't really need the meat, so they're just pulling the hide off, they're hiding it, and then they send it in. But the fox carcass was about a 15 to 20 pound carcass, and it was just going on a bone pile and being wasted. Well, they got pigs, and then they started feeding those to the pigs, and it was a pretty good system. Pigs did well on it. Plus, she works at a restaurant part-time and brings home lots of scraps. And there is a brewery on the island, so there's a lot of spent grains. And she's really taken to the scrounging aspect of raising pigs. So now anything from their house that they don't need goes to the pigs. And when we butcher the pigs, then all that will come in the house, and she'll get replacement pigs, and hopefully by that time the island will have seen the virtues of these pigs, and there'll be a lot more pig business going on in the island. But yeah, I think foddering systems are great. If you look into it, mostly everything you can custom build it yourself or use things that you find, to scab it together basically, or you can spend $10,000 and get a whole unit, put in. But I don't think you'd want to do that. How's that?
Follow-up question behind that. Sam wondered about following pigs behind cows and pasturing.
What following is when you let your cows go through a field, and then you would let something go behind them. And pigs will go through a cow patty, and they'll pick out anything that's still edible, like a piece of corn, or they'll actually eat the cow manure. And it's kind of gross to me. The thing that I would have a problem with there, Sam, is if you're letting your cows go on, let's say, your hay field. So you've cut the hay off and now you're going to graze it. If you put pigs out there, and I don't care what kind of pig it is, they're going to dig. And if you think, well, there's plenty of food out there, they don't need to dig. No, they're diggers. That's what they do. They dig when they don't need to dig. They like to dig. It's just like little kids. They love digging. So that would be the downside of that too. And the other thing to look at, all right, when a cow lets one go, it builds, it creates this little world there, this little bacterial, microbial, rich little world that comes out of the back of that cow. And I have noticed that when those are left alone, you wind up having on some fields, not all, but you wind up having a huge ring around there that the next year it's even a little bit bigger, of greener grass, thicker thatch coming through. So I've heard of people wasting diesel fuel, taking a machine out there and breaking up the cow turds, but I don't think it's the greatest thing to do. I don't think it's necessary. So I graze my cows over my hay fields after I've cut my hay, and then I'm not getting back on them until the next growth, the next spring, and there's nothing left, but there is a lot of green grass that comes with that. I think it's a system that was designed. Let's see, what did a friend of mine tell me today? He said, when your books don't line up with nature, it's time to throw your books away. Just let nature. So cows being out on the field, we're mimicking the bison out on the plains. And if you don't know anything about the grass that was out on the Great Plains, it wasn't like thatched, close cut uh, golf course grass or the grass around our houses that we cut with our Kubota lawnmowers. It wasn't like that at all. It was like 8 feet high, and it had everything from very young growth to very mature growth that was very high, that was really tough. But it created shade and coolness down below, and the amount of forage that was there was incredible. So a lot of times the bison would be going through that, and you couldn't see them in it. It was that high. So the abundance that can come from a hayfield is incredible if it's done properly. And I don't know if following with pigs is going to be what you want to do, because they're going to dig it. I don't even know about following it with chickens, because I think there's a benefit to just leaving that cow flop alone. Just leave it alone and let it be there the way it was designed. We don't get the same bang out of manure on the fields when we scoop it up, put it in a manure spreader, and then go out there and basically dispose of it. You don't get the same bang out of it. No way, shape, or form. Or the way they do it in conventional farming, they put it in water and they make a soup out of it, so it's easier to handle. They can pump it into tankers, and then they take it out and they spray it on a field. It's gross. It colors the field like a dark brown, and it stinks like you would not believe. But you can have lots and lots of cows out on a field, and if you're out there with them, you might get a whiff of manure, but it's not gross. It's not. It actually kind of reminds you of home, But when a manure tanker goes over a field and makes a pass and the wind's coming your way, it is totally gross, and it's gross for about 3-4 days. And now they do it all the time, because the environmental departments run defense for them. So they're doing it in the wintertime. They're spraying it on the snow. And, it runs off into everything, and it's a total mess. It's a total wreck what they're doing. Our streams and rivers around here are so full of vegetation, and it shouldn't be there. It's just that there's so much chemical that's running into it. It's gross. I hope they stop it soon. I hope we all go back to the type of farming that we're doing. We could feed the world this way. You don't have to do it that way. And it's not working for them. So, yes, ma'am.
Quick one.
All
Any
right.
suggestions for sourcing Freedom Rangers for someone in Southeast Michigan?
Oh yeah, easy. Freedom Rangers, you can get them from Town Line Hatcheries. Is it Town Line or County Line? Town Line. Town Line Hatcheries. They're down in Zeeland. We use them. Piece of cake. I think the minimum order is going to be like 25.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you got to pick them up at the post office. So, piece of cake. Town Line Hatchery, Zeeland, Michigan.
Yep. They do a good job.
Yeah,
They
Freedom
stand
Rangers
behind
are
their
good.
chicks.
Freedom Rangers are really good. Yeah, and they're good people too. We've done business with them for years. I would highly recommend them. Highly recommend. Some of the other ones, they source from hatcheries all over the place, so you just never know what your schedule is going to be like. In our case, we get a call on Tuesday. Your chicks are in. I make a beeline down there, get them. We'll have the brooder ready to go. They come home in the brooder, getting their first drinks of water and their first feed. Get them bedded down that first night. We make it through that. We're good to go. The earlier in the day you can get them, the better off you are. And you get them on a day when it's cold and rainy, bring them in the house. You just do everything you can to shelter them for as long as you can. And if we want to talk pastured poultry, we can talk times and dates and all that stuff. But I'm good.
Okay, this is a question from Rick Ayers. He'd watched the video How to Make Good Pork and wondered if you could sometimes show the fat on the Mangalitsa after skinning. I wondered if you could speak to that.
Well, like we don't skin the whole carcass. We scald and scrape, and that's what we teach. I think it's the best way to go for maximum utilization of the fat. I got a lot of things come to my mind. I was just on the phone with a friend of mine that's a chiropractor earlier today, and he had gotten a pig from us, and he's experimenting with the use of fat for regeneration of the human body. He gets a lot of people come to him, and they're all beat up from drinking Coke for 20 years and smoking and eating pizzas, and they're all beat up. And so he's trying a bunch of stuff to help regenerate them. And he found that the fat from the Mangalitsa, pasture raised, no soy, no corn, tested 100% every single time. He tested it with everybody he tested it. And the other components that are used a lot of times are things like CBD oil, and there was various other things. But the fat worked every time. So I'm telling you that because if you skin a pig, it's kind of like skinning a watermelon. You're going to have a lot of fat on the skin. And then your skin is going to be useless because it's going to have hair on one side, fat on the other side. What do you do with that? So what we teach, and the reason we teach it, is we teach to scald and scrape. And the reason we teach that is because we use the skin. The skin is full of stuff that is very consistent with the human body, and that works really well to provide building blocks to rebuild the stuff that, the brain cells that we blow out by doing the things that we do, has to be replaced with something. So he was actually saying to me that Weston A. Price did research in the 30s and went to Inuit tribes that were still living the way they had lived for many, many, many thousands of years. And so they were eating whale blubber, like crazy amounts of blubber. They would have blubber, but very little meat. And so that when they ran out of meat, they ate blubber. And they had perfect teeth, no cardiovascular problems. And you would think eating all that fat, the guy's heart's gonna, well, it depends what kind of fat it is. Now this is fat whale blubber. Whales aren't eating genetically modified sardines. They're eating, natural stuff. But he said that data is no longer consistent with the Inuit tribes because now we have trains that go up there that bring corn and, Captain Crunch to them. So most of them have no teeth and they don't live past 30 years old now. So it's kind of too bad. But fat is something that you definitely need in your diet. So that's why we scald and scrape, because we want to utilize as much of that fat as we can, and the skin as well. So I don't show it because I don't do it. The only time that I skin pigs around here is if I am doing kind of a quickie, and like maybe it's a boar that has outlived his usefulness here, and we're just gonna get him processed, chunked up, put in bags, and froze for my dogs. Then I might skin it. And I'm wondering what you want to see. Do you want to see if there's a way you can get a nice smooth appearance, because it's pretty difficult to get a smooth appearance. And then if let's say you quarter the animal up while it's hanging and you grab a hold of a pig that's skinned, with the fat layer down, and you're trying to hold on to a 200-pound chunk of a quarter, pretty hard to hold on. And if it hits the ground, it's going to pick up everything it touches. So it's another good reason to leave the skin on. But if you want to expound on that, have at it, and I'll get back to it.
You're doing good.
Is that what you wanted to know? Is that what you want to know? I don't show pictures of it when I've skun a pig
Right,
because I don't skin pigs.
right. And also you found that when you went to skin it, it put nicks in the fat and things that made it, and it was hard to get all the skin off the hide, so you just lost, the
Yeah,
fat's
you
too
lose.
valuable.
You lose a lot. Fat's valuable. Yeah, I think I went through that.
Yeah. So, all right. You can only speak for a little while on this one.
It's going to be about guns.
No.
No?
This is Brad Baker. He's kind of new, but he's watched several
New
videos and maybe missed it. But he was watching an old video from when we were visited over the picture.
Oh,
of the
yeah,
ham.
yeah.
He
Yeah.
heard you mention a ham picture in a magazine. What specific law did they think you violated? Thanks for your videos. Hopefully I can raise pigs one day.
Yeah. You know how I tell you all the time, your perspective will change. Well, this is a good example of that. Okay, what happened was during the time that the Attorney General's office had pretty much put us under a siege here, right? They made a declaration that our pigs were illegal, even though they weren't. There was no law, but they just say things, and they lead you to believe things. They throw stuff out there, and we kind of run with it as people who are not versed in the way the law works and the difference between a law and a regulation and a fatwa and other things like that. We don't really know how to apply the Constitution to our situation. We don't really know why people who supposedly work for the government would not understand the Constitution. So there was a lot of gray area. Well, this is what happened at the time. The Department of Natural Resources had ordered me to kill all of my pigs, and I refused. I said, "You come do it then. Let's let it be your hand that does it." And of course, they were not going to do that, but I wasn't going to do it. They said I could sell my pigs out of state, but who'd want them after they supposedly were illegal? So then our customers quit buying them because they were intimidated by them. It's the way communists work. They go after your customers. So then I had a lot of pigs. I had no money. I had no income coming in. I had no way to feed them. So I had to do something. And so we just made the decision, we're going to process them. So we pretty much said to our friends, hey, come on, we'll help us with this and we'll load you out with meat, because we didn't want to just shoot them and let them lay there. So we did that. And I had a friend that was he was a customer. He's a chef up in Traverse City, and he was a friend. And he was not easily intimidated by any of these departments. And I don't think they wanted to pick on him anyway. He's feisty and he doesn't take any crap from anybody. So as a gift, I gave him a ham that we had hung here. It had the hoof on and everything. And we had hung it here, right? I'm going to give you that information. And he posed with it in an online magazine. And the way the story goes, the health department up in Traverse City was going through this online magazine, and they saw this ham and they thought, we'd better check out that it's safe. So we're going to have to find out, was that ham processed at a USDA plant? So instead of them getting on the phone, like they're really interested in that stuff, like the safety, yeah, right. So they called the Department of Agriculture. The Department of Agriculture called the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And instead of calling me, they called my butcher. And it just so happens I walked into the butcher shop when he was on the phone with the USDA, and he looks up at me and he says, yeah, he's right here. And my butcher is an old Marine. And so he gets off the phone. He says, what have you done now? I said, I don't know. And so they were just trying to stir it up. They were just trying to start a little bit more intimidation, intimidate my butcher so he wouldn't work for me, intimidate my customers so they wouldn't do business with me. And so instead of them getting on the phone and calling me and say, hey, was that ham processed at a USDA plant? They sought a warrant from a judge to search my property, my vehicles, my house, and my records, which means they take your computer. They came up the driveway with 3 state police. We were here at 9 o'clock in the morning on the 17th of December, right? I couldn't believe it. And it was a total mess, but we kind of held our ground, and the state police were pretty good about it. They didn't know why they were here, but they were told, of course, this is what the Department of Ag told them, was, we're afraid of him. He's dangerous, right? Never done it. I haven't been in a fist fight since high school, right? Never hurt a fly when I was 20 years military service. My airplanes did, but I didn't. And that's how they treated me. You know, they brought the state police to intimidate me, but I have a rapport with them. They're like me in a lot of ways. And so we talked it out, and the weenies from the state wound up getting scared and hightailed it out of here because I made them wait a little bit. So what law did I violate? None. If I had cut that ham, if I had processed that ham here at Baker's Green Acres, I mean, slaughtered that animal, under the Fifth Amendment, I have every right to do that. But at the time, I had a contract with Department of Ag that my products going to restaurants would be killed at a USDA plant. And they looked at the ham and they saw the hoof on, and they thought, no way the USDA plant would do that. But they will. If you talk to them nice, they'll do it. It can be done. So I didn't violate any law. I just violated one of their little policies, and they went and got a warrant from a judge. So when that happens and you go to a judge and you seek to circumvent someone's Fourth Amendment protection to be safe in their personal effects, in their home, in their papers, in their communications, you seek to circumvent that over a picture of a ham, that judge heard about it. Not from me, but I put the word out that this is what had happened. I made several videos about it. And the food inspector that did that was abruptly retired. And but it did cause problems because I caused a lot of discontent in their organization because they're totally out of line. They're totally out of line. And so then they bared down a little bit more on me, and back and forth and back and forth. But through that whole thing, we realized that the key is, if you're going to do business, if you want a small farm, this is going to be my message this weekend at this conference, never enter into a contract with the Department of Agriculture. And you would say to me, oh, well, Mark, if I don't enter into a contract with the Department of Agriculture and I don't have a license, well, then I can't go to farmer's market with my stuff. Fine. Let the farmer's market dry up and blow away. Let restaurants dry up and blow away. All those people that are buying from a restaurant or buying from retail or buying from a farmer's market, they got to buy. They can still buy from you on your farm, or you can set up a drop point. And when you sell to the end user, you sell at retail. When you sell to a restaurant, you got to sell wholesale, or they can't, the price point would be too high by the time they put their 30% on it. That's a good question, and it really is something to ponder, because I would never know that if I didn't have the perspective I do now from the pressure and the heat that they put on me and my family. And instead of getting angry about it, I got smart about it, and I know who they are now. And it's time we all started to know who they are. And that's what this conference is. If you know Joel Salatin at all, you've got to come away from listening to him and saying, that is a very intelligent man, but he's wise. All right. So If he's decided to do a conference now that is going to put a stick in the eye of these organizations, saying, we're going rogue, we don't need you anymore, the time is right. And I just have to trust that the time is right. So the time is right. I'm glad you asked.
You touched on this a little, but more specifically, Sam wants to know if he can legally sell the animals he butchers without being USDA'd to death.
Sure. You're going to be restricted though. If you try to sell them to a restaurant, that restaurant has a license, and the terms of that license is all your meat coming in must be killed under USDA supervision. And what does that mean? That means there's a guy there with a bump cap on that says USDA and a clipboard, and he says, yep, not real scientific, not real scientific. And they have their little rules and regulations. But under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution, and this is something you're going to have to not take my word for it. You're going to have to look into it. The U.S. Constitution is the supreme law of the land. Supreme means something. It means that there's nothing that comes before it in the United States, nothing. So under the Fifth Amendment, get it and read it. I recommend people download the Bill of Rights all the time, read it. It's a page. There's 10 amendments there. A lot of them you're going to know, a lot of them you haven't seen before, but there's a lot of real good stuff there. It's worth studying. But the Fifth Amendment states that your life, liberty, and property meaning process, is protected under due process of law. All right, so if you can find a law that says that you can't butcher an animal and sell it to your neighbor, if you can't find a law, then you haven't broken a law. So what does the Department of Ag do? They come up with a reg. They come up with a regulation. Well, that's nice, but I'm under no obligation to follow that regulation if I haven't entered into a contract with them, right? So you might say, well, gee, what if they come and they catch me handing meat to somebody and they're giving money to me? Can I get in trouble? What, do you think they're going to put you against the barn and shoot you? No. And that's not going to happen because the Fourth Amendment says that in order for them to come up your driveway, they have to be invited or have a warrant, right? And even if they have a warrant, warrants have to be very specific. Doesn't mean you have to spill your guts what you're doing or anything like that. It's not any of their business. Now, if I have somebody call me and say, hey, can I buy some hay? Sure. I don't have to involve a third party. If somebody wants to buy a puppy, sure. I don't, so long as they're good people and the puppy likes them, I don't have to involve anybody else. Now, why is it? Because we have a Department of Agriculture. We feel as though we need to involve them and we got to get a buy-off we got to make sure that they're okay with it. Baloney. I got stronger words than that. Baloney. Do not do that. Don't involve them. They're a third party. You don't need them. We don't have a department of puppies. We don't have a department of hay. But I'm sure now that they watch this, they'll probably say, hey, that's a good idea. Department of Puppies. So you have to get a license to sell puppies now. Why? You're an American citizen. Why do you need, the Revolutionary War was about taxation without representation. You weren't being represented in London or in England, but they were taxing us at a whopping 2%. Some state agency like Department of Ag saying, if you want to sell at farmers markets, we got to come inspect your freezers just once. And then you can pay us $200 every year from then on. But if you don't have that license, you can't sell at farmers markets. That's extortion. That's absolute extortion. So my advice is don't sell at farmers markets. Let them rot. Don't sell at restaurants. Tough. Let the restaurant industry put pressure on the Department of Ag to lighten up, to kiss off. But tough. And same with retail. Let them deal with, food service stuff. That way they all, when you go to a restaurant here in my town, whether you're going to the worst restaurant or the best restaurant, it's all coming off the same truck. So the original question was, can he sell it without being USDA? Sure. You're just not going to be able to sell it to other people who have contracts with them, i.e. restaurants, retail, farmers markets. Can't do it. So let them go. And you're better off anyway, because a restaurant, you have to sell at wholesale. You want to sell retail. You want to get the most you can for your product. And so your restaurant does a bunch of advertising so they have a customer base. You can do that. Actually, Salatin is the master of that. He tells how to do that in Pastured Poultry Profits. If you haven't raised poultry before, raise 50 the first year, or say 100 the first year. 50 for your freezer, and then 50 to sell, and if you don't get them sold, give them away. When you give somebody a chicken, first of all, you're giving something that you made, you'll be proud of it. And then when they have it, they'll say, oh, I got to have more of that. I got to have more of that. There's your first person that you're going to write down of your customer base. And then you keep getting them. And as the process keeps going, you'll have more people than you have chickens, and you'll have more. I have no pigs to sell right now because I sold them all, at a good price. So there's my answer on that.
Yep. It was good. Brittany, and I'll get back to Steve's question, but Brittany wondered if she should worry about her other pigs being curious with having new piglets. The sow that she had asked about had 3 and they lost 1.
Yeah.
So they get 2. I know I have others due soon. Should I worry about them trying to take the piglets as their own? And should I worry about my boar? He was very close, in the same vicinity when she was checking on the piglets.
I take the last first. Don't worry about the boar. It sounds like your boar is in with your sows, and that's fine. That's a sounder. And that's a good way to go. That mimics nature the way it would be. I have seen a boar eat a piglet. It happens, but as a rule, they don't go crazy. And the boars that I have right now haven't ever touched a piglet. They want nothing to do with the sows other than to sleep with them when it's cold and, mate them when the time is right. That's all they want from the sows. And the piglets, they could care less. The only thing that I've ever seen that has not worked out good, and I've seen it a couple times, but then there's been other times when it could have happened and it just didn't happen. So I don't know what the deal is on that. Is if you have, say, 2-week-old baby pigs, and then you have a mom that flops over and she starts putting them out, her milk is going to start flowing right about then. And then the 2-week-old pigs will come over and start nursing off her, and they'll push the little pigs, the brand new pigs, out. And that can happen. That's a bad thing. So if you think that's going to happen, it usually is going to happen in a really bad way when they're first coming out and they're not sure where to go. And then if you have 2-week-old piglets in there pushing things around, they can get kind of turned around and pushed way too far away from the sow. So in that case, maybe what you want to do is take a couple of hog panels and make a big circle around it and just wire it up, drive in some fence posts to hold it down to keep the other baby pigs out. But generally it doesn't happen. Usually, they can be within a month, all going within a month, which they would be if the sounder is put together like that. And you shouldn't have any problems. Is that the one that I called back today about the water? No?
No,
Okay.
no, she's in Minnesota.
Minnesota.
Brittany.
Way over in Minnesota.
Yeah. All right. Question from Steve.
Yes, Steve.
Trombley.
Trombley.
Yeah. Is there any reason you can't use lard from a boar for soaps or lotions?
That's a good question. Well, you're going to have to experiment and let us know, because if you eat it from a boar, an intact boar, you will get a taste. And it's more of a smell, actually, that you get. Like when you eat it, you actually smell it more than taste it. And it smells crude, but to the point. If you've ever urinated on a campfire, it's that smell. That's that boar taint smell. And I'm sure everybody has urinated on a campfire. And now this chats on the internet all the time about boar taint, and some people, oh no, we didn't have it, and Mangalitsa pigs, they never have it, and oh, there's equipment you can buy to check for it and all this other stuff. I don't know. We've been butchering a long time, and I have never come across a boar, intact boar, that did not have that smell. When you open them up, you can smell it. And I don't eat it. I don't want to eat that. I think I've told you stories about that, but to make soap, who eats soap? Haven't eaten soap in a long time. Notice I don't use bad language anymore. So I did eat soap at one time. But I think you're going to have to try that and let us know if you're going to butcher a boar. And while you're at it, eat some of the meat and see what you think. I had a boar one time. This is a long time ago. This is 20 years ago. His name was Gordy, and he was big. He was big. He was probably 900 pounds. And I had no way to get him in a trailer. He was not going to go. And I wound up calling the butcher and said, I'm not going to make it. And he said, well, just shoot him and throw him on your pickup and bring him up. So I did. And while I was loading him, I got his blood on my hands, and it stunk. It smelled that smell. And that was the first time I ever smelled that urine smell. And he says, no big deal. We'll make all kinds of sausage and pepperoni and stuff. You won't even notice it. Oh, good. That was my first experience. Well, I came home from work. It was probably a month later. Came in the house, and as soon as I came in the house, I smelled something familiar, and it wasn't good. It wasn't like kids' urine. It wasn't like, adult urine or anything. It was different. It was just different, but gross. And I went up into the kitchen, and there was a platter of all these nice meats laid out, salami and all this stuff. And I got close to it. It just reeked. And I said to Jill, do you smell that? And she said, no. And then she would eat some, and she'd say, yeah, I kind of do. But the kids, no, they were eating it up. And I called my buddy, the butcher, and I told him what happened. And he says, oh, yeah, if you got the blood on your hand and you got that smell, you'll have a hard time with that from this day on.
It's a super gamey kind of taste. So,
and I have. So we were at some friends' place in Vermont. They had a bed and breakfast, and they also raised pigs. And we had brought them a replacement boar. And I said, well, what happened to whatever his name was, Horace? Oh, we butchered him. He was like 4 years old. And I said, really? How did he turn out? I said, fine. I said, didn't taste a little funny? No. Said, this, in the freezer, in the fridge, there's a whole bunch of breakfast sausage. Help yourself. And so the next morning, I was upstairs, and Jill's cooking breakfast sausage, and it's like, I could smell it right away. I wouldn't touch it. Okay. I think I really went a little too far on that one. Is there another question?
Yep. I think I'll get this right. Have you fed mushroom substrate to your pigs? He's got 50% sawdust, 50% soybean substrate that's just been taken over by roots.
Now, I'm sorry, what is that now? 50%?
Right. The substrate for the mushrooms was 50% sawdust, 50% soybean.
Substrate?
The medium that he's growing it in.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And it's been taken over by roots. Have you ever fed mushroom substrate to your pigs?
I have not. I have not. But I would, if I was you and I had a bunch of that and I wanted to, utilize it in some way, I just feed them a little. I can't see where that would, that's mycelium. That's pretty natural in the environment. I can't see where that would be a huge problem for pigs. Usually if something that's going to hurt a pig, they won't eat it. I think that's the rule of thumb. And I don't think we've ever had a pig that ate so much that it caused it problems. I can't think of ever. No, I don't think that's ever happened. And believe me, I've fed everything under the sun to Mangalitsa pigs. If they won't eat it, they won't eat it. But
they might
eventually
like it.
they
You
eat it.
never know.
Yeah, they might like it. Might be the greatest thing. If you're in the mushroom business, by the way, I need some shiitake, the stuff that you put in, the inoculant to put in my logs. I got to take a restart. If that's the business you're in, I'd love to do business with you.
All right. Lone Star wants to know if you feed your dogs raw or cooked eggs.
Oh, raw. Yeah. I mean, if we had cooked eggs like that didn't get used, sure, they'd get it. But no, they get raw. And they get them shells and all. And they'll eat them too. They eat rotten eggs too. And then they come up and lick your face.
Yep. All right. Yeah. Sam saying boar meat is kind of like Rocky Mountain oysters. He calls, yeah.
Yeah. Interesting story. When we lived in Montana, I had a friend that I worked with in the Air Force, and he exclaimed that, oh yeah, you can eat them. You can, when you castrate pigs, you can eat them. I said, really? Why don't you guys come up? Bring your family up. We'll castrate pigs and we'll eat them. I ate like 2, and they tasted just like boar taint. They were gross. They smelled gross. They looked gross. There's plenty to eat on a pig. I'm not going to eat the balls. On calves, they're pretty big, but we still don't eat them. I think it's gross. But, I can see. I eat a lot of gross stuff, but. All right.
Steve wanted to know, do we feed the dogs raw boar or do we cook the boar meat?
No, we feed it raw.
They don't really care.
They don't care.
In fact, they like it with a couple weeks of raw added to it.
Yeah. I don't want you to think that we don't care about our dogs, but like if we process a boar that is here under our supervision, if he's healthy, I just know I don't want to eat him, but the dogs have to eat too. And I usually do the butchering. If I saw that there was something unhealthy or something that was going to hurt the dogs, by all means, I would just condemn the carcass and it would just get buried. But I don't want you to think we just feed them, the dogs, anything. You have to be somewhat careful with dogs because they will eat things that are not good for them that could cause them problems later on. But if I'm butchering a boar, I'm looking at the meat. If I see something that's not good, if was somehow wormy or something like that, no, I wouldn't let them get it.
Got a question from Robert. He just measured his manga gilt. She's 23 months old. She taped out 57 inches girth, 57 length. with the formula, she came out to about 415 pounds. Is that generally what your 2-year-olds weigh?
Yeah, that's about right. That's about right. That's a good size, actually. I got really used to doing that this year, 400 pounders, and then when I did a 200 pounder a week ago, it was like, wow, this thing's tiny. But you know, your pork chops are going to be, everything's going to be bigger. The quality of the fat's going to be better, creamy, nice. I think a 2-year-old pig is a good way to go. I don't think you're going to deal with any toughness issues. I think that's something, that's a preconceived notion that an older animal is going to be a tougher animal. I don't think that's true. I think an older animal is going to have better flavor than like a suckling pig. I think it'd probably be tasteless. I know calf veal, I wouldn't waste my time with it. I don't even want it anywhere around because you get psyched up for a good meal and then it tastes like nothing, like eating sponge, and it's a real bummer. Our what we just did 2 steers that were 3 years old, completely grass fed. We hung them for, I forget what the day count was. I should know because I talked about it on here several times, but 6 weeks they hung. And I had some of the tenderloin today. The tenderloins on them were this big, and we had them for lunch today. It was an experience. It was some of the best meat that I've ever had. Now, these things were 3 years old, but we've found when they're a little older, that's when they develop and they get the flavor, and they're big enough, with a tenderloin like this. That's the muscle on the inside. The loins on the back were like this. So a 400-pound animal. Plus, when they get to be big like that, they're a lot easier to manage. They've gone through their juvenile stage where they do stuff, I think. Although my sows today, this is weird. I never had this happen. The fencer was up. I mean, they could reach it, and they always could reach it, but they never did because the first thing that they would touch is one of the wires, so they'd get shocked. They pulled it down, and I saw that laying on the ground. I went in there and I put it back up, and I thought, gee, that must have I didn't have that tied up right. They pulled it down again. So I don't use them this time of the year because the fences are pretty well frozen to the ground anyway. I've got a foot of snow out there, and the fences, they're not really working anyway. So I just brought it in. But that's the first, and they tore it down, and they could have ripped it to shreds, but they didn't. So I was glad of that. Been $300 out the window.
Brittany wondered if you can explain that weight formula.
I can't, Brittany. I haven't. I don't know it. I haven't looked at that in 20 years. So I'm sorry, I can't. You'll have to look that up on your own.
That's all I have for questions, and it's 9:14.
Okay, I had one question from Robert Freeman, and he said to me, what do you do when you get random people stopping in wanting to buy stuff? And I think you have to learn to read the public. I think what his concern is, you got a random person stopping in, and then maybe that's it's secret squirrel, and they're there to set you up somehow and get you in trouble over selling raw milk or something like that. A horrible crime like that. What we do is we run a business that's a referral business, right? So, but at some point you got to start with people you don't know. And I do have people call me on the phone. I'll talk with them a little while, and I get the feel for who the person is and what their motivation is, And I suppose it's sort of an art And we have had people that we've done business with that we will never do business with again. You know, they kind of think that we're like Walmart or something. And so I think what you want to do is get together start a customer base of people that you know. And when somebody comes to you, you could say to them, well, who referred you? Now, if you have a sign up in front of your house, well, you know, people could have said, well, I was just driving by and I saw your sign. Okay. But if you say, well, who referred you to me? And they say, you know, then maybe you want to think twice about selling to them. You can always refuse to sell to anybody. That's the nature of the beast. You know, this isn't like you have to bake a cake for somebody if you don't want to. You don't have to do that. You don't have to sell to people if you don't want to. You can just say, nah, I don't want to. And that's happened with us before. We just decided, no, we didn't want to do that. Some people are always trying to get over, always trying to scam. And we really don't want a customer base like that. We want people that we want patrons, right? We want them to be sort of members of the farm, like they would refer to us as my farm, you know, the farm that we do business with, our farm. All right. We want them to be members of the farm family. We really don't. That's another reason why doing business with like a restaurant or retail store, you never see the end user. So you miss out on that benefit of the guy I was talking about before that was talking about the fat. I mean, he's a chiropractor. He came up here, spent the afternoon, great guy, full of information. I would miss out on that if I was selling my pigs to some distributor that was selling it to him. And he would miss out on it too because he couldn't come to the farm and see how we do it. And then he can't go to his customers that he's passing some of this on to and say, I was there, I saw how this was raised. That's the word of mouth that you want, the referral system. So important. Way better than putting up a billboard out on the highway. You know, it's way better. Let the restaurants and the retail stores do that. You don't need to do that. Your customer base can be full pretty quick because there's all kinds of different techniques to do that. And I don't think you really need to utilize much more than a card or maybe a card with a magnetic back on it somebody can flip up on their fridge, you know. So if they have their buds over for dinner and they're eating one of your chickens, oh, this chicken is good. Where do you get this stuff? I can refer you to the farm. I can refer you over there. But we've even said to people, don't refer people to us that are jerks. We don't want to do business with jerks. We want to keep it a close, tight family. And when we have openings, you know, we'll take a few more people on. Same thing with milk. I don't have to do business with people that I don't like or I don't trust. Do business with people that you trust. And build a customer base of people that you would not mind having into your home because they're trusting you. So, you know, they say nowadays you can't trust anybody. I don't know. We're going to have to figure out a way to trust people because without that, we're in a tough position, especially in this business. Did a couple more questions come in? I'm going a little long.
Yeah. Oh, and Mike Finn said one of the guys that's talking is just up the road from him and he's bought cattle from him. So
awesome.
That'll be a fun connection this
weekend.
Sam also wanted to know if we sell pig skin, leather goods. Do mangas have good skin? Would that be a good side product?
Huh. We haven't. Well, yeah, we do sell it because, you know, it's useful for food. I mean, the pig skin is definitely edible. It's full of things that are very beneficial. So we do sell it like that for people to eat it. But I don't think I'm not selling like pelts for you to make footballs out of for your Muslim friends. I haven't done that just because we haven't had it. But that would be something. That would be something. Mangalitsa football, be furry. But I don't know, Sam. You're going to have to experiment with that and then share your experience with the tribe so that we can pass that on. Mangalitsa. Yeah, Mangalitsa. I could just see a vest or something made out of Mangalitsa with the fur on it, or a jacket, a full jacket with a hood. Or maybe just hats, Mangalitsa hats, blondes and swallow bellies and reds.
That would be cool if you could tan it with
That
the
would
hair
be.
on.
That would be cool.
Yeah. There you go, Laura. Laura and
Yeah,
Mark.
green bean. What about, I have 2 beef hides that are hanging up here that I don't think I'm going to get around to. Loud, isn't he? All right.
They're speculating about something like those old cowboy vests, with
Yeah,
the high.
that's what I was thinking
Yeah.
of too. Is that about
Yep.
it? All right, we're gonna conclude this session. It was good to see everybody in, and I hope everybody has a good week. And let's start thinking about warmer days and caressing our creation here, and looking forward to the abundant lifestyle that comes from farming. Good night, everybody. Thanks for coming by. Remember, anyone can farm.